Hey team, and welcome to another Dueling Rabbits Productions video about awesome things to weave on the Drawloom. Today's exciting topic is Polychrome Satin, my new favorite thing in the world. It's awesome. Now, normally we're accustomed to thinking of satin damask as a binary textile. As in this drawdown, we often see it woven with a single weft color and a single warp color. Sometimes the warp and weft are even the same color. As a result, we have just two possibilities for ground and pattern. In this piece, for example, I've used a blue weft on a creamy warp. Since I wove it right side up, my pattern is showing up as cream warp effect units atop blue weft effect ground. Here, I have a piece that was woven wrong side up, so that the pattern appears in the pink weft color and the background is the creamy warp. We can also reverse ground and pattern in the same piece. For Indiana Jones here, I've used a black weft for pattern on my creamy background. But for Marion, I've used the cream warp for pattern, so her evening dress shows up to best effect. This simple approach to color is cool and classic and does not distract the eye from the complicated figurative designs we are showcasing. But sometimes having just two colors puts excessive limits on our vision. How can we add color to satin damask? Probably the simplest approach is to use different weft colors for a striped effect. In this piece, which I've turned on its side, the warp is an antique white, and I've changed the weft color every so often to add a bit of visual interest to a repetitive motif. Instead of changing our weft, we can add sections of color to our warp, as I did for this towel. The warp has stripes of blue, red, and a central panel in yellow. I used a black weft throughout, sometimes as ground and sometimes as pattern. In this section of lettering, my black weft shows pattern on the red warp effect ground. But in this section, my skeleton shows as yellow warp effect pattern on black weft effect ground. By switching things up in this way, we can fool the eye into thinking there are more colors than it first appears. On the same striped warp, I added stripes of weft also for a really colorful, complex look. If we haven't thought that far ahead and the mood takes us, we can even use butterflies and inlay to add pops of color to our work. But there are some limitations with all these approaches. When stripes are added to the warp, we're stuck with them until we beam a new one. Different colored wefts give us only one option across the warp, unless they're brocaded or discontinuous. And I hate dealing with butterflies with the passion of 1,000 burning suns. Those of you out there who enjoy this sort of weaving know who you are, and I say, more power to you. So what do? Well, recently a weaving friend gave me a book that has changed my life. It's this monograph by Carolyn Gritzmacher, and it contains a wealth of information about polychrome textiles, including tackete, overshot, and my personal new favorite, Polychrome Satin on the Drawloom. I dug in, got to work, and can't wait to share everything I've learned. Here's a simple polychrome piece in 6-end irregular satin woven on a plain white cotton warp. What makes it different from conventional two-tone damask is the use of several weft colors at the same time, which gives me total freedom to quote-unquote paint my units however I like. Here we see units woven in purple. Here, units in red. Orange here. And all the background units are woven in weft effect white, which is the same color as the warp. So at first glance it might seem simple enough. If we look at the lift plan, we can see that the purple units for this row are on shafts 7, 9, 10, 11, and 12. The red units are on shafts 2, 3, and 4. And the orange units are on shafts 21 and 22. The white units are all the rest. So common sense tells us that if we lift shafts 21 and 22, for example, we will weave weft effect orange pattern units on the underside of the cloth. So far, so good. But if we turn the piece over to view the side that faced up while we were weaving, we can see things are more complicated than that. This side of the cloth is also weft effect. Let's look at the opposite face of those purple units. We can discern the red, orange, and white wefts interlacing with our warp according to our satin counter. Here's the back of the red units showing purple, orange, and white. In every unit, the colors we see here are the colors not showing on the opposite face. All the colors run continuously across the warp without a clasp or wrap in sight. It's pretty cool looking in its own right, and very tidy indeed. But how is this effect created? Well, I'll tell you, by throwing every color in sequence for every row in every unit of weaving. Here's a drawdown of a white warp threaded in 4 units of 6 ends each. Tie-up is for 6-end irregular satin. I'm weaving with 4 colors, white, red, blue, and yellow. For illustrative purposes, I'm showing the side of the cloth that faces down when we are weaving. I am treadling straight as per usual, but you'll notice something peculiar. I hold each treadle down for 4 picks, 1 pick each of my 4 colors. For each color or pick, I am pulling a different unit while my treadle stays down. For each white pick, for example, I pull the rearmost unit, here. For each red pick, I pull the second unit, here. My blue picks are this unit, and my yellow picks are this unit. Once I've repeated the process for all 6 of my treadles, we can see the result. My rearmost unit is showing in weft effect white, my second unit in weft effect red, my third in weft effect blue, and my fourth in weft effect yellow. The units are crazy elongated in the drawdown, but IRL they will be square as usual, with the inactive wefts obscured at the back of the piece. Using this scheme, any satin structure can be used, and within reason, any number of colors can be employed. It's all much easier to show than describe, so let's get to it. First, we'll examine the setup of our loom. In most respects, we have here the typical setup for 6-end irregular satin damask. Coming off the back beam is my 16-2 cotton warp arranged in units of 6 ends each. I'm using mallions for my leashes. Here are 2 mallions threaded with 3 ends each, weighted with a single lingo. The leashes are organized in a single point on the pattern shafts, an arrangement I favor for narrow and experimental warps because it gives me great flexibility while having the number of pattern poles I need for a full symmetrical design. At the front of my loom, I have my 6 ground shafts with their long eye heddles threaded straight, as per usual. And my tie-up is the 6-end satin damask variant that I use most often, since I love it very much. The only real difference between this setup and, say, the one for some napkins I wove a while back is the set. Normally, I would set 16-2 cotton at about 46 ends per inch if I'm using 16-2 for the weft also, but here I have my warp set at 30 ends per inch, a difference of a whopping 42%. This was the result of a ridiculous amount of sampling, but it's probably a good starting point for anybody wanting to try this technique. Here's the lift plan for the piece I'm weaving now. I have my poles numbered as usual, 1 to 24 in this case, but I've shaded the units in the 4 colors I'm using. Purple here and here, red, orange for this little unit and the frame, and the rest in white. I will always throw my shuttles in the same order, with purple first, whether or not I need a particular color in my design. I've got my work cut out for me, but if I approach it methodically, I'll be fine. Here we go. We're about to start weaving this row right here, directly above the post-it. I scan to see where my different colors are going to appear in this row. Since I always throw my purple weft first, I'm going to identify those units to begin with. Here they are, on pattern shafts 5, 6, 8, 9, and 12. So I'm going to go ahead and lift those 5 shafts like so. Next, I press my first treadle and prepare to throw my purple weft. Here I go. Done. That's the first pick for treadle 1 complete, but I still have 3 more to go. Back to the same row on my lift plan. I'm doing red next. I always do red second. I can see I need to pull shafts 1 through 4, 10, and 11, so that's what I'm going to do. I don't need my purple units for this pick, so I'm going to release those pattern shafts as I go. I've not removed my foot from treadle 1. In fact, I'm going to leave it there for this entire sequence of 4 picks so I don't forget where I am. I throw my red pick. Orange next. I can see I need to weave 3 units in orange, 7, 21, and 22. So I release my red pulls and do the necessaries for my orange ones. Treadle 1 is still down. I throw my shuttle of orange weft. Last up for treadle 1 is white. For this piece, since I'm weaving a white background, I will need to pull every shaft that hasn't yet been used for color. This is going to take a minute. With treadle 1 still down, I throw my pick of white. Awesome! The first row of my satin unit is now complete. But of course, this is 6-end satin, so I've got 5 more to do. We're now here on the first purple pick for treadle number 2. I leave my post-it where it is and move my foot to the next treadle. First up, always first up, is purple. I pull the same purple units as before. Remember, I haven't moved my post-it, and throw my purple pick. I leave my foot on treadle 2 all the while. I repeat the process for red, orange,
7 in the borders,
and white.
2, 3, 2, 4, 6, 8. Throw white.
Now I'm here, so I move my foot to treadle 3 and repeat the whole process again. By this stage of the proceedings, things start to speed up considerably. I'm able to remember which shafts need to go up for each color, and I don't need to refer to my lift plan so often. The pulls become intuitive. I won't say the weaving gets fast, but it's not nearly as slow and laborious as you might think. I find talking to myself helps enormously with speed and accuracy.
7 and those. Orange.
After I've pressed treadle number 6 and thrown my last pick of white, my 24th pick for this pattern row if my math is accurate, I'm ready to move my post-it to the next row and do the whole catastrophe all over again. Let's look at the row we've just woven. This obviously is the side that faced up while I was weaving. For my purposes, it's the wrong side. If you look at these little squares here, you can see white, purple, and red threads only. That's because on the right side, the other side, these squares are being woven in the remaining orange. Here, where my motif is outlined, we can see only red, white, and yellow, because the underside of these units is being woven in purple. And finally, in the area surrounding my motif, we see every color except white, because white is the color of the background on the right side of the cloth. In this way, even though the piece is being woven upside down, we can intuit how our design is weaving up and whether we've made any mistakes. There's no rule, of course, that says you have to weave polychrome satin upside down, but it does greatly reduce the number of pulls if it's done this way. And honestly, I think we've got enough to worry about already. But that doesn't mean we can't have 2 or more colors showing in our pattern units on the reverse side of the cloth. What's cool about this approach is that we can increase the number of colors in our design without increasing the number of shuttles we need to throw. Look at this example. I wove it using 4 shuttles, white, red, blue, and yellow, but I have 9 colors showing for my Mackenzie & Childs inspired Harlequin acorn. Here we see areas of pure color, red and blue. But my pale yellow background contrasts with these darker yellow stripes. And these little bits show purple, even though I had no purple weft at my disposal. Here's orange, even though I had no orange weft for this piece. And where did these large areas of pink come from? Behold the magic of optical blending, where we raise the same pattern units for more than one shuttle. Here's a row of plain blue units. The lift plan tells us they are unit numbers 1, 5, 9, 13, 17, and 21. These were woven, as we've already seen, by lifting those units when we threw our blue shuttle. But we've also got these areas down here in green. Color Theory 101 tells us we get green when we combine blue and yellow. So whenever I see green units in my plan, I know I must lift them for both my blue and yellow shuttles. Same thing with pink. Wherever I see pink units in my plan, I know I must lift the same units for both my red and white shuttles. Purple I create with my blue and red shuttles. Pale yellow with my white and yellow shuttles, and so on until I lose my nerve. It's a little confusing to weave at the loom, but the effect is so cool. You may be wondering whether optical blending is preferable to adding shuttles with new colors to the mix. I think this is probably a matter of personal opinion. In this piece, I used 5 shuttles and only 1 set of pulls for each color. I really like the stark effect I get with this approach, but the cloth is quite stiff from all the packing, and there are undesirable ridges where I pulled all the colors for optical blending on these horizontal stripes. Another thing you might notice about this piece is that background units were never pulled. This gives us speckled warp effect units that I think are kind of cool, but they do interfere with the clarity of the pattern. Contrast that against this piece, where I pulled background units and wove them the same color as the warp. Again, I think it's a matter of personal taste and would encourage you to try different effects yourself. To summarize, here are some important things to keep in mind when you embark on your Polychrome Satin journey. First, every color needs to be thrown in sequence for every treadle, whether or not that color is required for pattern. The set needs to be widened considerably depending on how many colors are being used and, of course, the thickness of the weft yarn. Pattern shafts or single units can be employed, but keep in mind the brain power required for multiple picks on the same treadle when single pulls are being used. Pattern-saving lashes might be a good idea if going this route. Consider how to balance your color requirements with the number of shuttles needed. Optical blending is your friend. Background can be pulled or not, depending on the desired result. The warp color can be almost completely obscured if background is pulled, for a wide variety of color effects on the same warp. Any variety of satin can be used. Just dress the loom as you normally would for the damask project of your choice. Even polychrome twill would look great, I bet. This is one technique where the sky's the limit and the rules seem few and far between. I hope you'll try it. And as always, thank you so much for watching.